There are three schools of thought when it comes to the ways to use essential oils. There's a German model, a British model, and a French model. Now, the Germans focus primarily on the inhalation benefits of essential oils. So that's the scent or the smell of an essential oil. The British model focuses on the use of perfume or aromatherapy grade essential oils used in a diluted form in massage. So they take a small amount, a few drops of the perfume or aromatherapy grade essential oil, combine that with a large amount of a vegetable carrier oil such as sweet almond or jojoba essential oil, for example, combining the two together and then using that through massage. Whereas the French model, they actually focus on the use of therapeutic grade essential oils used directly on the skin and taken internally. Now, in France, French doctors actually prescribe the use of therapeutic grade essential oils. So if you went to a French doctor, they may actually write you a prescription for the use of a therapeutic grade essential oil. And they're able to do that because French doctors are taught how to do that in the French medical schools. Now, the great news is we don't need to be a doctor to be able to get the benefits of essential oils. So in the foreseeable future, I don't see the use of therapeutic grade essential oils being incorporated into the medical training that our doctors have here in Australia and in the United States and New Zealand, for example. But the great news is we can use the essential oils ourselves. We don't need to be a doctor. In fact, Dr. Daniel Pennewell, in his book called Natural Home Healthcare Using Essential Oils, talked about how when using specific therapeutic grade essential oils and taking them into the body, they can actually be not only safe, but highly effective and more effective than many other modalities. So it's something that we can look to incorporate in our daily lives as well. You may have also heard that essential oils can't be taken internally, and again, I'd heard that and seen that written on the labels of other brands of essential oils I've come across. Whereas with the Young Living oils, we actually have essential oil-based supplements which have been approved by the Australian government for internal use, which contain some of the Young Living essential oils. So why is it that we're able to take some of the Young Living oils internally when we can't do that with other brands? I learned from people like Dr. David Stewart, who wrote the book entitled The Chemistry of Essential Oils Made Simple, that if you want an essential oil that you can look to take internally, if you're looking for an essential oil for healing purposes, that you need to ensure that the only thing in your bottle of essential oil is the plant that's written on the label, with nothing added and nothing taken away, and that the entire natural profile of the plant is maintained in the oil. So when I heard Dr. Stewart say that, I could understand the notion of don't add anything and don't take anything away. So don't use chemicals during the growing or distillation, don't manipulate, don't add synthetic components. I got that part. But what I didn't understand or didn't know what Dr. Stewart was talking about was this natural profile, the fingerprint of the plant. I later came to learn that in a plant there's anywhere between 80 and 300 naturally occurring constituents in the plant. And it's the balance of all of those 80 to 300 constituents, which are perfectly balanced by Mother Nature as a whole, that offer the healing medicinal value of the plant. To be able to get all of those 80 to 300 constituents from the plant across into the oil needs to be distilled very precisely at a low temperature with low pressure for a very precise amount of time. And that's what Young Living do with their oils. Now, the time that it takes to distill an oil will actually vary from plant to plant. So let me give you an example with cypress oil, for example. With cypress oil, there are 280 constituents that naturally occur in cypress. Now, to be able to get the first 20 of those constituents across from the cypress plant into the cypress oil, it takes 20 hours of distillation. To be able to get all of the 280 constituents from the cypress plant into the cypress oil, it takes 24 hours of distillation, and it's in that last 20 minutes of distillation that the last 18 constituents come across from the plant material across into the oil. Now, most cypress oil that's available on the market is distilled anywhere between 1 to 2 hours. Now think about that. If it takes 20 hours to get just the first 20 constituents across, how many constituents are those other brands of oils getting if they only distill the oil for 1 to 2 hours? Not very many. I also learned when I visited Young Living's farms that they grow their plants organically. So Young Living actually have their own farms internationally. They have farms in the United States, in France, and several in South America. And I visited 3 of the United States farms personally. When I visited the farms, I saw how they grow all of their plants organically without the use of chemical pesticides or fertilizers. And they actually hand weed their farms, very labor intensive. And I thought about that. If it takes an entire peppermint plant to produce just 1 drop of peppermint oil, if that peppermint plant had been sprayed with chemical pesticides and fertilizers, how concentrated would those chemicals be in that 1 drop of oil that I want to use directly on my skin? Young Living also test every plant before they actually harvest it. So they'll take a sampling from the fields and ensure that the plant is at its medicinal peak. So the medicinal peak of each plant varies, so it'll be at different times of year, different seasons, different parts of the day. The balsam fir trees, for example, which are like, we call them like a pine tree, they actually have their medicinal peak in the middle of winter when it's snowing, very cold. So they test the plants to ensure that they're at their absolute medicinal peak. They also test every batch of oil that comes into the Young Living warehouse. And they test the oils using very sophisticated equipment. They're called GCMS machines. They look a little bit like what you see on the CSI programs, multi-million-dollar equipment. And they test every batch of oil to ensure that not only is the oil entirely pure, that no chemicals are being used during the growing nor distillation of that oil, but also to ensure that the oil meets a therapeutic medicinal level, because we're wanting oils that are going to have great benefit for our health and healing. So they test the oils, and if they don't meet that established standard for the therapeutic level, they'll actually reject the oil. And what that means is that Young Living actually reject 72% of the essential oils sent to them from their own farms and also from their partner farms around the world. And what that means is sometimes we'll actually go without an oil for an entire year if an oil isn't produced that meets that Young Living standard. So a few years ago, for example, there was a $500,000 shipment of Helichrysum essential oil sent to Young Living from one of their partner farms. And they tested the oil using the GCMS, and they found that although the oil was a pure oil, it didn't meet that therapeutic standard that Young Living requires, so they rejected the oil. And it actually meant that we went without that amazing oil for an entire year. So they would rather not offer an oil at all than to compromise their standards. So they are just some of the lengths that Young Living go to ensure the purity of their essential oils.